Cross Politic on the Fight Laugh Feast Network. We have our guest coming up, Ben, Missionary Ben. He has a podcast,
Missionary Ben,
on our network, and he's actually somewhere close to Hong Kong or China. We can't say.
Whoa.
Yep. But he's tomorrow. We're today.
He knows the future then?
He's welcome to the future. You guys know this? No, you don't.
No.
And we're also going to talk about the Hurricane Helen. Helen. And there's actually some myths and rumors already going around about Hurricane Helen and everything. So we're going to talk about that.
I love rumors.
And wars? Rumors of wars?
Especially if it's conspiracy rumors. I'm in.
Get your tinfoil hat ready.
I have it.
Are you a Christian struggling to find companies that align with your values and beliefs? Squirrely Joe's has you covered for all your coffee needs. All their coffee is hand-selected and roasted fresh every day by a family of fellow believers. Try them out and you'll savor exceptional coffee while knowing that your investment supports a company committed to following God's teachings and upholding truth and righteousness, ensuring your hard-earned money contributes to the growth of God's kingdom. Stop giving your hard-earned dollars to pagans who support evil. We have a fantastic offer for our particular listeners, readers. Your first bag of coffee is free. All you have to do is cover the shipping. Head over to squirrelyjoes.com/crosspolitic to claim your free bag of coffee today.
Oh, free.
Free.
My favorite price.
He's also going to be at the conference serving his coffee through every break.
So everybody going to be turned up is what you're saying.
Yeah, we'll be ready.
squirrelyjoes.com/crosspolitic. Get your free bag of coffee today. Page 50 is a distinctly Christian marketing company striving to help Christian-owned businesses grow and succeed in our digital age. They don't want to just make a paycheck. They want to change the world, and that means building it alongside you. The mission is bigger than just Sunday. Page 50 wants to help Christians recapture the work week, economic and political influence, and the public square. Page 50 doesn't work with just anybody, but if you're a believer, they want to work with you. Visit page50.com. You got to spell it out, because he doesn't own Page 50. It's PAGEFIFTY.com.
I tried to help.
And see what they can do for you. That's Page 50, PAGEFIFTY.com. Page50.com.
They don't just work with anybody. That's really nice.
Yeah.
I get to choose who I want to work with.
So
B.F. Weston was deported from China. Am I not supposed to introduce him yet?
No, just before we got there, I was actually just going to go through. We have about something like 60 booths for our conference. We have room for a little bit more, but we got all sorts of. We got Media Row. We got 10 podcasting shows for Media Row. So
my goal is always to hit every podcast, even if they want me or not.
Yeah. And if you're a company, and if you're
I'm here. Oh, you know what I did last year? I can't remember who I did this to. It might have been Greg. I just sat down there and started recording on their podcast. Who was it? It was Dead Man Walking. Yeah. I did that to a couple different people. And it was like, surprise.
And you hit record.
I don't even know if they found that audio. I just sat there and started recording the show, and I didn't care if they needed a podcast or not.
So there's still room to sign up, though. People want to come.
Yeah, still room. We got still a little bit of space left for some booths and vendors and everthing.
And just regular tenders can come, too.
Oh, yeah.
There's room for them.
Of course.
ProdigalAmerica.com. Sign up today. I mean, you're still trying to figure out your fall schedule, and you're like, what are we going to do for Reformation Weekend?
We got you covered.
Yeah. We're in Fort Worth, Texas. Prodigal America. Dr. James White,
Dusty Devers,
George Grant, Steve Dace, George Grant.
Stop it.
Did we mention George Grant?
Did we mention Pastor Wilson
Also,
yet?
Douglas Wilson. I'll be giving a talk. We're going to do a live show about something.
Mm-hmm.
Did you know that everybody who attends gets a full thing of sackcloth and ashes for the
for repentance?
Yes.
That's what
we're getting.
That's all that's in the bag.
That's it.
Sackcloth and ashes. That's really good.
That's funny.
Definitely check it out. Come to prodigalamerica.com. Register today. Register your family. Register your youth group, your small group, your whole church. Just do like the whole leadership team. Get them there. Okay, now should I introduce?
Now you can.
Mr. B.F.
Missionary
Weston.
Ben.
Missionary Ben, or B.F. Weston, was deported from China in 2018. You know, first of all, that's just a really great way to start your bio.
Yeah.
I mean, how many of you can say I was deported from China? Mm-hmm. B.F. Weston can. Missionary Ben can. In 2018, after serving as a missionary for 15 years in Gansu province, his passion is to help Christians pray more strategically for China, while also helping to mobilize a new generation of missionaries from both Latin America and the English-speaking world. Missionary Ben, thanks for coming back on Cross Politic, man.
It's good to be here with you guys. Good to see you guys again.
So I know you're
don't forget. There's a little note there that you didn't finish. Ben is going to be one of our cross-politic news journalists.
It doesn't say that on there.
Covering international news. It doesn't say it on there. That's true.
The producers failed.
No, I added that to myself. But so covering international news and
don't
cultural issues.
Don't let Gabe add stuff.
And crosspoliticnews.com is going to be dropping October 31st.
He's like undercover right now. I understand. Like he's somewhere.
Yeah, he's somewhere
in the future,
close to China. In the future, close to China and Hong Kong.
Is it? Are you at Tuesday? You're in Tuesday.
I think so. No, it's Monday. No, wait, Tuesday. I don't know what day it is.
Yeah, it's Tuesday for you, man. It's Tuesday for you because it's Monday for us.
That's right. Your time as one of our news undercover news journalists is not. You're starting out kind of shaky.
Yeah.
Kind of shaky.
Concerned. He don't know what day it is.
So what are you doing
here right now? I'm just passing through. I'm actually in a place that I used to live in many years ago, and I'm here getting as close to China as I possibly can legally. I'm not allowed in. They won't let me across the border, but I can get within a stone's throw. Where I'm at right now. And so I'm here to kind of, I'm here, I guess, how do you say it, to kind of not really give the actual middle finger to China, but I want to get close, and I want to do some things here where I can serve. And so I've got some stuff going on here yesterday and today with the local church here that we're giving the metaphorical middle finger to the nation up north, even though I can't actually cross the border there,
Johnny.
And so even now, we're right here.
Johnny Cash's favorite finger is useful even in missionary work.
Even in missionary work.
I'm glad you understand that, missionary Ben.
I immediately, when I heard that, I immediately thought that I can see the metaphor there, and I can feel like what we've done in China for many years is to say, no, you cannot tell us not to share Jesus. We will share Jesus. We will defy your idols and your nation. In that sense, again, not literally, but metaphorically, yes, of course.
Yeah, absolutely. So bring us up to speed. I mean, what is the state of things? I mean, it seems like things kind of ebb and flow with the news that's coming across. I know you've got your finger on the pulse constantly. You've got so many friends and connections there. But what's the latest? I mean, we covered a bunch at certain points where you've got the pastor of Early Rain, I forgot his name, Wang Yi, who was imprisoned for refusing to register with the state. That was another one of those places where he defied that tyranny and is suffering the consequences for it. I know we've had a lot of stuff with Hong Kong over the years.
5-year anniversary of the protest that kicked off.
But how would you describe kind of the state of the gospel in China? I mean, I know there's probably so much to say about that, but I mean, give us a little bit of an overview.
It's bad. Right? It's not getting better at this point. It's getting worse probably overall in the last few years since Xi Jinping has taken power. In 2012, yeah. And so he has not loosened his grip. He's definitely trying to, we lose sight of China sometimes and Hong Kong and everything that's going on. And we think, it's out of the news, but China is still slowly taking more control, daily, weekly, monthly, getting rid of people they don't like that are in power in certain ways, or people that have any kind of authority, whether they're in the news. Or one of the articles I sent y'all, or I was reading today even, was regarding the journalists. Hong Kong has lost 900 journalists in the last 5 years who some were arrested, but most of them had to just quit and leave and go somewhere else because they could not serve in any real capacity because of the new security law. And so China is just pushing, creating their own world and their own narrative there. And it's happening in Hong Kong, and it's happened all over China. I mean, years and years ago, but Hong Kong is kind of the front line of that, at least in this part of South Asia.
What was the new security law?
I mean, 5 years ago, the law, what it really was is they made a law where they could actually prosecute people in Hong Kong for crimes that would be crimes in the mainland. So Hong Kong, when I first started coming out this way and serving in Hong Kong and China, it was 20-something years ago, 2002, my first visit, 2003, I was here all year. Hong Kong was amazing back then because you crossed that border from China to Hong Kong and you were like, I'm free. I can do whatever I want. I don't have to worry about them commies up north. I can just I'm here. I can go and do whatever. And it was a little bit misleading even then, because even then it was already turned back over to China officially, but they hadn't really done anything to take that control or to take that authority back. But now you can't go on the streets of Hong Kong and openly say something very normal, like, communism is evil, Xi Jinping is an idiot, whatever it would you'd say. Now, if you say that publicly and you get recorded, you can be dragged off and arrested and charged with Chinese crimes, even though you're actually in Hong Kong, which functions as a different state because they have their own passports, they have their own border security and stuff. And so it's just fundamentally not the same place it was 20 years ago, or even less than that, even, 5-6 years ago.
So if I remember correctly, maybe my timeline's off. Was this 5 years ago? So it was 2019 then, right?
2019 is when those riots, protests, peaceful protests that started out as, really began to gain momentum. And that was leading up to when that law was supposed to be legally implemented. There was a certain date and it was going to come into play, and they were protesting that because they knew it would have bad consequences. So the protests were leading up to that particular law coming into effect.
It's funny because I'm thinking about this. Right after that, we have our own moments that happened, I guess, kind of worldwide in COVID. Mm-hmm. COVID. So it's kind of like they almost primed the pump and checking what's going on there in Hong Kong. And then we all got the rest of whatever globalist idea applied to us in COVID. And so these two things they're not really disconnected.
Well, some people think that COVID and the fact that it got loose in China initially, whether they did it on purpose for that reason, because Hong Kong really was a problem for China in 2019. It was a big problem. And COVID started to spread in China. Some people say that there's a connection there from COVID and the fact of the Hong Kong protest. And it gave them cover, especially in 2020, to completely wipe out any residue that was left of the protests and the riots because of the COVID situation. And so, again, it's coincidence potentially, but it looks like there was definitely something going on there, and they were using that to their benefit.
Or they were at least really
at the very least
very happy to use that. And so to the extent that they needed to shut everybody in their houses and shut down the protests.
And our government followed that protocol.
Right. COVID was our government.
Well, Hong Kong had one of the worst lockdowns in the world. It was absolutely insane. I've got a buddy, I definitely won't say his name just for security reasons, but he was living here with his family at the time, and if they left Hong Kong for those years, not just 1 year, but a couple of years, if they came back into Hong Kong, if they left and came back, they were forced at their own expense to go spend like 30 days in a hotel in their own city, just down the street from their house, and pay massive amounts of money just being in quarantine, multiple levels of quarantine, just to come back and go to their own home again. So they basically locked their people in and said, if you leave, you got to stay out. You can't come back in. So it was they definitely locked Hong Kong down tightly, or as tightly as possible, or more tightly than anything we knew in the U.S. for sure.
It's amazing to me. So this is this week is the 5-year anniversary of those Hong Kong protests, but it's also, isn't it like the 75th anniversary of the Communist Party in China?
Yeah, technically the protests were going on all during that year. And it was still going on at that point. But no, today's October 1st. Hey, by the way, tomorrow's doing okay. We're here. It's October 1st where I'm at. It's September 30th still where y'all are at.
That's correct.
So here in Asia, it is it's already October. It's Chinese National Day. It's their July 4th. Today is their July 4th.
Wow.
Today on the streets of the city where I'm at here, there's Chinese flags lining the streets and lining the roadways here. Today there's going to be big festivals in different parts of China, all over China, and in many places. Hong Kong today is not the day. You would not want to go to Hong Kong today and go hand out leaflets, freedom, democracy leaflets in Hong Kong today. You would definitely be talked to or disappeared if you did that today. So, by the way, if this feed gets cut, or if I start to disappear, you know that they found our feed here.
Wow. We got Missionary Ben undercover on the border of China somewhere.
In Hong Kong.
Defying the Chinese communists for the sake of the gospel.
So then what is the Christian churches that are there? How are they engaging at all? Are they squashed too? I mean,
in Hong Kong?
Yeah, in Hong Kong. Because I guess if you take away that the journalists can't speak freely, I don't know how the church is going to be able to speak freely pretty soon.
Well, they had the same issue in Hong Kong, the churches, as we have in America, where you have some that do see the times they're living in and really see it, but then there's a lot that don't. And so there's division in the churches. And so that was one of the things that even good churches saw, a lot of division between people who said, no, let's not rock the boat. Let's just be good citizens and just let's just go along with whatever they say. Just go along. And others were saying, no, we've got to stand for liberty and our rights. And there were very, very few churches that were unified in any sort of attempt to stay strong and to keep a kind of a prophetic voice into that situation. So the churches are still allowed to do whatever they do, but almost none are speaking to this issue anymore. They're just completely silent on this issue because it's now, I mean, you can be literally arrested or even sent to China to prison if you have any connections there and different things. So Hong Kong is definitely not what it was. Let's put it that way, because it was always a place you could say whatever you wanted to say.
And so if churches, but it sounds like you kind of left a little door open that churches can speak up still. There's disagreement happening within churches, but do churches have a voice?
I'm referring more to 5 years ago. There was a big disagreement then. How do we respond? How do we deal with these protests? And there were people in the churches, some saying, yeah, let's go all in. Let's give it all we got and keep pushing. And others were saying, no. We need to be, it was the whole Romans 13 question, right? No, we need to submit to our authorities and not push back. And so there was that argument happening within the churches 5 years ago. Now it's not so much of an argument. It's just kind of a default setting is we just kind of have worship, have church, but we don't really speak to this issue that's happened to our country.
Wow.
To our city.
How far, I mean, so you taking America where we're at right now, how far do you think that we actually could be from something like that here? Because we're actually in the middle of that conversation right now. We're trying to get our Christian brothers to say, yo, the gospel applies all the way up to the civil magistrate. And if you don't start figuring out how it directly applies, they will apply some other form of their gospel to you. So we're in the middle of that conversation. Do you think that we can go that way?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, think about the people who, if they were in charge today, would implement almost identical laws in America. Basically the whole left would implement these kind of laws if they were in power and could get away with it. So we're not that far off. It's the wrong people get in power.
I don't know if you guys all saw the clip of John Kerry.
I was just saying,
John
World
Kerry
Economic Forum
talking about wanting
misinformation or disinformation.
If the Democrats can win this election, then we need to adjust the First Amendment because the First Amendment is allowing for disinformation.
Yeah.
And we have one central point of contact for all the information to come through and be filtered.
Yeah, and Ben, you've probably seen firsthand in China and Hong Kong how that goes.
Yeah. Well, again, China doesn't hide it. They say, no, the First Amendment, that kind of thing would not be good because we can't, because then how do you control what people say? That's what they basically say out loud. They say the quiet part out loud, like how can we control what goes on if people can say what they want? And so, yeah, our left would definitely implement these things, and it would obviously be for the good of the people, they would say, right, and for the good of society and for whatever.
This used to be an exaggeration. In the 90s, if you said the Democratic Party is going communist,
right,
you'd be like, that's a stretch.
You Alex Jones talking idiot.
Yeah,
right. Well, it's that meme or whatever where they say none of that's happening, and then it's like, well. Who cares if it's happening? And then it's good that it's happening.
Yeah,
it's like right. What's wrong with you? Mm-hmm. Communism is good.
Yeah, and it seems to me that this kind of slippery slope happens because you don't have preachers preaching like the clear truth of God's word. Because if you can see the clear truth, the clear light of God's word, you should be able to read like the tea leaves better of what's going on in your society, what's going on in your culture. The slippery slope is a real thing. For the the whole argument of same-sex marriage into civil unions, into marriage. I mean, you could see that happening in the 80s, that play happening.
Yeah.
But it seems like since we don't really, and part of this is the church isn't on the same page. This is maybe the Hong Kong problem too. Our church isn't on the same page here in America. We disagree on the state and condition of our country. I mean, you got Ray Ortland tweeting out he's supporting Kamala. And
I wonder how much he got paid for that.
You think?
It's just a question.
We should ask Meg
Basham.
Basham.
Ask a question. I don't want to be misrepresented.
Meg Basham.
She probably knows.
She's probably got a footnote and
she got a receipt. She got that receipt. But the point is like if you can see God's word clearly, you don't have sin in your life. You got logs out of your eyes. God promises that you'll be able to see things clearly. And if we can see the scriptures clearly, then we should be able to see what's going on in our culture clearly, and that's not happening.
Right. Well, and the same thing happens with people reacting to this. I mean, so you're talking about the slippery slope on one end, going into liberalism, communism, but you got people reacting to that, and now they're like, so what was, maybe the Nazis were good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like, we're like Martin Luther said that fallen man is like a drunk on a horse.
Yeah.
And
he could fall off both sides of the horse.
After he falls off on one side, he decides to fall off on the other side just to equal things out.
Yeah.
That's, I mean, we're doing that. And so there's people also, kind of red pilling, black pilling.
Yeah. Nazi pilling.
Yeah. And they're like, no, maybe white supremacy is a good idea.
Right.
Maybe being racist is good. Maybe it is all the Jews' fault.
Yeah.
It's like they're doing that very thing. And so there's slippery slopes on both sides. If you don't have the word of God front and center, if you're not anchoring everything in scripture, and in Christ, you will just react, and then you will overreact,
right,
and then you'll overreact again.
Yeah.
And you're just that drunk guy on the horse.
Ben, I always think about, I have a friend who was in South Africa a long time ago, I think during Reagan's time, right when Reagan got elected. And he said, you guys in America have no idea how much your politics really bleeds off into the rest of the world. And so while people were arguing about who to elect president, we were so happy that Reagan was elected because we were down here and we knew everybody would act differently if Reagan was elected. And I never forgot about that. And I'm not always thinking about everybody else in that sense. I'm thinking about America, would be good for us. But is there a point where, do you think Trump would actually be good for everyone, for Hong Kong if he was elected versus, Kamala, we know we're going to get with her, but does our election in that sense matter what happens at all in Hong Kong?
At this point, I don't know if anything's going to change with Hong Kong itself. I was going to say this before I answer your question, Knox, what Gabe said about the church in Hong Kong and different things. To be clear, the church in Hong Kong was never going to win this. The question was, though, are they going to go down fighting, or are they going to just compromise and kind of bend over and go with the flow and actually kind of sort of quiet clap along with whatever was happening? But they weren't going to win this particular battle. And the difference in the U.S. is we still can, we still have the authority, the ability to say, no, we don't want these commies in place, and vote them out and implement better policies. Hong Kong didn't really have just the cloud. They're just such a small place compared to all of China pushing down on them from the north, that there was just no way they were going to win that particular battle. And so with that in mind, if Trump's in place, there's not much he can do really for Hong Kong. What he can do, though, is, you're right, a lot of people in Hong Kong, even though they're kind of silent now, they still do. They live and they think and they act politically in their hearts, at least more like Americans. They do gravitate towards those kind of characters like a Reagan, or in our case, like a Trump. And so he would be somebody that they could kind of look to and have some hope for the future, maybe. But as far as practical benefit, there's not a whole lot he could implement that would be a help to them, other than maybe just being a thorn in the side of China, the Communist Party, and causing them to have to figure out how to deal with Trump again for another 4 years. Because China definitely wants Kamala instead of Trump, because they can manipulate the Democrats however they want, but they can't really manipulate somebody who nobody can manipulate. He's just kind of his own person, for good or for better, for worse.
When Trump was in office before, how did that go for China and Hong Kong? I mean, I know that was his first term, was leading up to
2016
to 2020. So it was leading up to that law being passed. He
was president when Hong Kong fell. He was president.
Yeah,
that's right.
So he didn't do much. I mean, he didn't. Yeah. There's only so much he could have done. But I don't remember him saying. I mean, he said a few things, I think, but he didn't, throw the whole weight of our machine behind helping Hong Kong either. He kind of, said a few things, but kind of just let things happen as they were happening.
I know he's talked about he talks a lot about the tariffs that he's wanted to, slap on Chinese imports. But how does that play over there?
I mean, again, it's more symbolic than anything. Okay. It does cause China some headaches, but it doesn't really change much. They just raise prices. They just kind of figure out how to deal with the price changes. And I read somewhere recently about the tariffs that what they would do is if the tariffs were high coming out of China, then the Chinese companies would just ship their stuff to Thailand first, and then Thailand would ship it to America. They just avoid the tariffs. Okay. And it would be a little extra money for shipping a little further, but they would just avoid it. And so they would just find ways around it. A little bit of a headache, but it really was more symbolic than anything.
One of the other things that we talked about, I remember now, is the whole the Uyghur situation with those
slaves and LeBron James shoes and
there was this whole thing for a while, like a bunch of journalists kind of talking about the abuse of these. They're like Muslims. They're like Arabs. Like, are they Arabs in China? Is that right? And some of which were Muslims. I think some of them are Christians, but just the kind of the camps, sort of concentration camps, work camps, and their treatment.
That conversation died.
What's come of all that, Ben?
It's still ongoing. China's had to kind of really be careful not to let information get out, because they really were getting hit hard on that, and they still are in some circles and quarters. There has been some overreach, like people have said that slave labor making your Nike tennis shoes and stuff, and that's just not quite right. There's a potential that there's somebody that was working in a camp somewhere that had some part in the process, maybe many steps down the line. But it's not like people make it sound, where there's a Nike factory run by slaves somewhere. That's not accurate either. But there still are a lot of these people going through re-education camps, and in some cases, if they're considered radicals, they're put through torture and maybe killed. And there's Christians that are also put in those camps as well. People that are very active believers. I mean, Wang Yi. We talked about Wang Yi. He's in prison 9 years. And we don't know what he's going through. We don't know what kind of psychological torture they're doing with him, trying to get him to potentially break or recant his faith. We don't know. We won't know until he's either released or something comes out in another couple of years. It's been 6 years. He's got 3 years left.
Wow.
So yeah, the Xinjiang Uyghur thing is still ongoing, but China's got that whole province pretty much blocked off. Journalists can't get anywhere near to even start asking questions and figuring out what's going on for sure on the ground. And so it's still there.
I might go ahead, Pastor, because I think what I'm going to do is
I'm going to ask a different question.
Yeah, me too.
I was going to ask a different question. I was going to move somewhere else.
Yeah, me too. I was going to. So maybe I'll go, because Ben, you might not like me after this question. I just want you to know right now. We're still friends, and I love you, bro. But as you're talking, I'm thinking about the strength of America and the strength of our nation, and I'm thinking, boy, if we were stronger, if we were more stable, then we would be a better help to even people around us. And it's not that I don't care about missions. I totally do. And I'm happy that you're a missionary. I want to support you in everything you're doing. But it seems like we really have a broken down, we're not as bad as Hong Kong. I just want to put all the things out there, right? I know with this, I got it. But it seems like America is going to have to really do some focusing in on itself to get strong before we could actually be a benefit to other people. Because for whatever the globalists are able to do out there, they're ransacking America just as hard, and we don't seem very strong to be able to help anybody else. And so in one sense, it's like, no, I want to give to missions. I want to help missions. But it feels like I want to bring a lot of our focus more into America and say, why don't we spend the next couple of years or a period of time anyway, to develop and strengthen our own nation, and then let's double our efforts after we get that strength back to us. Does that make sense?
It does. I would say, though, we're still, comparatively speaking, we're still so strong compared to other places that we can probably do both. We can have fighting going on both fronts. We can have people out there doing the special ops in foreign places, and an army at home working hard to build the foundations and to grow stronger. And so not every country has that ability, but the U.S., from what I see as I travel around and visit churches here and there, we do have the manpower to be able to fight on both of those fronts, I think.
Well, we started giving a lot of money to Ukraine, and I'm just saying, like, it'd be nice to keep some of that.
Not that. No, not that, please.
I'm thinking, like, it seems to me that I think this is how God has always done it. Like, God doesn't grow his kingdom in a very neat and tidy way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like, we're to be as, and Jesus says, count your troops before you go to war. I mean, we're count the cost before you start the building project. And so we're to individually and by churches and families, we are to count the cost and figure out what can we do with the resources we have. But God is not limited by anything.
Right.
And so he is free to sort of scatter his people and assign his people in a number of different ways. And you think about, like, how did the gospel explode into the first century? Well, Stephen got murdered and they started persecuting Christians. And so a bunch of them stayed, because a bunch of them stayed till the end, until Jerusalem, right before Jerusalem fell. And then they finally left. But a bunch of them scattered and they go preaching wherever they go, and they go for different reasons to different places. They didn't coordinate.
Yeah.
They didn't say, all right, everybody to Antioch. Let's take Antioch and then make sure we have a good home base in Antioch. Well, some of them went to Antioch, but a whole bunch of them went to Africa, and some of them went to the Middle East, and some of them apparently went over to Asia.
Right.
And some of them, went over to Greece and Rome, and they just scattered, and God was sovereign over that.
Individuals made good decisions for them and their family to.
And I'm thinking also, I'm listening to a book right now called American Nations, which is really, really fascinating. Colin Woodard is the author. Know nothing about him. But he is arguing that basically, the colonial America was basically 11 separate nations. And they thought of themselves as 11 separate nations.
Right.
Yeah.
And it was a rodeo to get them to, and even during the War for Independence, he says, actually, in reality, there were 6 wars for independence. He says they didn't even think of themselves as fighting the same war.
Which is why the information is so crazy.
And some of the colonial nations fought on both sides at different times during the war. It wasn't just like a bunch of American patriots, on all your, Christian history books.
Yeah.
Everybody behind Washington, George Washington. It wasn't like that. It was a mess. And you just look at it and you think to yourself, how did God make us out of these people on all these? And it just underlines to me that, like, there's always a sense in which on the ground it feels like chaos. Like everybody's working with a mess, and God's, in heaven ruling, and he's knitting it all together so that nobody can really be like, yeah, I did that.
Right.
What
we did is we got together.
No, it's like, I imagine George Washington on his deathbed thinking, I don't even know how that happened. What a miracle that we actually formed a nation. And so, I think, in defending, Ben's point is, I think we can and have to do. Everybody's doing a little bit of everything. Because you think about the same thing in your family. You got work on your family to do,
that's right.
But you also got neighbors who don't know the Lord.
Right.
You've got your church responsibilities, but you've also got your work responsibilities. You got extended family responsibilities, and then you got national responsibility. And everybody's got different gifts, and so you've got to give yourself, and you've got to count your cost. You got to do your budget. You got to figure out, well, what can I give here? What can I give there? How many hours do I have in the day? What are my gifts and abilities, and how can I use my talents in the best way possible? That's a hard call.
So then let me move into kind of the area that I was thinking about, because I'm thinking about what's going on right now with the whole flood that's happening in Georgia,
North Carolina.
hurricane. And I'm thinking about a lot of the people there that are not, it doesn't seem like the way that they're talking about, they're not getting the help and assistance they need from the government. Right. And I'm thinking, well, that would be the first thing that I would want to be healing and taken care of our people that we have right next to us in our country that need our help. And so if we have an institution that has leadership that doesn't care about those people getting the kind of needs they need, like they care about the folks outside, I want to say, no, that's not the way to do. We want to take care of the people that are our citizens that we're supposed to be taking care of first and foremost.
Sure.
And then let's figure out how we meet the need of everybody else outside of that.
Yeah. Well, and it's not like we're like being really careful in our accounting.
Yeah. Right. No.
It's not like they added all the money. Like, sorry, we already gave that to Ukraine. We're all out.
Right.
The federal government's never said that.
No, they'll just print some more.
I know. That's what I mean.
And even Biden's like, hey, I've allocated all this extra money to help out there, and so it's going to get there. But the people that are there just kind of feel like they've been forgotten in a lot of ways.
Right. Well, and a big part of this, though, is that I do think we have a creeping communism, socialism, when I think there can be a role in emergency, totally a role for all the governments to pitch in.
Right.
You got an emergency and it's like, who can get the resources there quickest? But we have a knee-jerk communist mindset, socialist mindset that says the person that's responsible for fixing this is the government.
Right.
Is the civil government.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying they have no role, but I think we ought to be thinking in terms of all hands on deck, families, churches.
Yes,
and I know on the ground there's a whole bunch of people. Like I heard
Foster?
No, this is someone else.
Franklin Graham's on the ground. The Samaritan
I was going to say what I heard, which is not what you heard.
He didn't hear what we heard.
Okay.
But no, like there was a family there, a Christian family there. This was on the Samaritan Ministries Facebook page. Somebody told me about it yesterday that there was a family on Samaritan Ministries and just sharing, asking for prayer and saying everybody in our neighborhood, we're the only one with a generator, a whole house generator. So everybody in our neighborhood's coming over and charging all their stuff and getting stuff at our house.
Yeah.
Pray for our generator to hold out and our fuel to hold out pray for these people because it's a ministry.
Yeah.
And but I know there's a lot of that happening.
Yeah.
I know there are people, like everybody's all hands on deck. I know there's a bunch of churches that are jumping in, as you said, Franklin Graham.
Yep.
But I think part of the issue though is when you look to the government says, okay, then we need the money.
Right.
And so there's this cycle though of they're going to take more money from you because they're going to take care of you.
Right.
And now you have less money and less resources to be there on the ground to help your neighbors and for your church to help your neighbors.
Well, it's such a bad instinct to want the federal government to help you, and especially, and it's really tempting during a national disaster to call on the federal government. Like, hey, we need help. And it used to be when a natural disaster happened, presidents wouldn't fly in to that state because they wanted to recognize that the governor's the leader of that state and going to help and deal with that. They didn't want the federal government to be a distraction. So presidents wouldn't fly in. I forget which president started it, but to me, it's been set such a bad precedent. But also, it's like if you learn as a community and as a state to even take care of your own natural disasters, you're creating a certain kind of citizen.
Sure.
You're inculcating like a certain kind of value and neighborly goodness in people in that state when they're the ones helping with all the stuff and not the federal government coming in with FEMA.
Yeah.
And I don't mind, when you have a full-on disaster, hurricane, whatever, I don't mind the National Guard being called in to help, people.
But that's a state thing. That's not even a federal thing.
Yeah. Oh, that's state.
That's the governor.
Yeah. He gets to decide that. Ben, you were saying something about this with, was it China or Hong Kong too, the way that they deal with natural disasters?
Yeah, China, not Hong Kong so much, but yeah, China in general, communist China. This is their 75th anniversary. But one of the things they've become known for in recent years, especially, is anytime there's a big disaster, they'll throw everything at it and try to make sure that people don't feel disenfranchised or feel like they're forgotten. And so, you'll have houses destroyed in an earthquake, and they'll go back and they'll rebuild like mansions for the people. Not literally, but they'll build better than what was there before. And whatever it is, they'll just do more. Like there's cities that there's a city I used to live in Tibet many, many years ago that was destroyed in an earthquake in 2010. And they literally razed the city and built a new, bigger city in its place on top of it. And it's all structural. It's not like they're not actually loving and caring for the people individually, but they're just like, hey, we're going to take advantage of this. And new airport, new city, everything's new. The whole city looks completely new after that earthquake. And so, but the goal of that is to make the people at least pacify them and say, oh, look, our government at least provides for our basic needs. But it's this communist mindset, you said, where you're looking for big brother God, in Beijing to come save you when anything like that happens.
That's exactly what they're doing. They're buying the loyalty of the people. Yeah. And you give them just enough to make everybody loyal and then dependent. And now they can't do anything for themselves. They can't take care of themselves. And but we have that creeping in our land.
Yeah.
During COVID, it was handouts, stimulus checks. We'll take care of you. We'll provide for you.
Which is why if there's a natural disaster in Idaho, I would lean really hard against the federal government getting involved here.
Yeah.
You know, I'd be like, no, this is our people got it.
Yeah.
We're going to figure it out.
Yeah.
You know?
So would you call for other states to come in and help?
I have no problem with calling neighbors to come in. If I have a friend who's got a bulldozer in the state of Washington, 7 miles from us, can help with the dam or whatever flooding.
You're talking about you're talking about all private industry or public industries. Public.
So far, that's
neighbors.
been the first response right now on the ground in North Carolina and Tennessee.
I think you want to. We also remember too that like the people who are the closest to the problem usually know what is best to solve it.
Right.
Yeah.
Now they may not have all the resources always, and then you work out in concentric circles. I mean, this is why in 1 Timothy 5, it says a man who doesn't provide for his own household is worse than an unbeliever. So you first provide for your own people, and then if the family can't, or there's no family to take care of them, there truly are widows or orphans.
Yeah.
Then the church steps in, and you have a local church, and I think with that can also come a local community. And then you might go out to county at that point, and then county goes out to maybe other counties nearby,
neighbors, counties,
and then and maybe Whitman County, Washington, maybe in a neighboring county in Montana assists.
I mean, remember Trump? Trump got a bunch of ventilators during COVID.
That's right,
which were causing the problem.
Yeah, making things worse.
Right. Think about
a lot of them weren't even you.
No, they're probably stored in storage somewhere in New York or on a boat off the coast.
Yeah, he's probably still proud of all those ventilators too.
There's a connection with this back with China. So with the church and with the government, back in 2008, there was a major earthquake in Western China. I don't know if you remember this or not. In Sichuan province, big earthquake killed hundreds of thousands of people in the Tibetan foothills of Tibet. In Sichuan, not too far from Chengdu, the city there. That's actually where Wang Yi was pastor, is that region.
Wow.
And he's going to tie into this in a minute. So what happened is it was a major thing. China really wasn't ready at that time to come in and help their people like they are now. This is before the era of Xi Jinping, who kind of is trying to bring this more to the forefront. And a lot of Chinese Christians went in first in China, even in China, went in and were helping feed people, were helping with rescue and going through rubble. And it caused the government to lose face because you got these Christians on their own dime going in to help. And the government came in and actually had to force the Christians out and say, no, we're the ones that are supposed to be doing this. And they actually came in and there was a kind of a fight there, not a literal fight, but they were coming in and they had to create boundaries. No, only official search and rescue can be here. And so they pushed the Christians out that were already on the ground of their own accord to help in that recovery time. And then that was probably the first time that I can remember that China, they really did, after that loss of face, they went in and rebuilt all those towns better than they were before. That was the beginning kind of that new era of whatever you want to call it, internal diplomacy that they did.
Wow.
And we were in the region at the time. And but they closed. They blocked everyone out. They had journalists blocked out. They had the Christians. They tried to get rid of the Christians from the region.
Wow.
And we tried to get in and see some things we couldn't get in. The reason I say this connects to Wang Yi, though, I don't know if you guys realize this. I was doing some research on Wang Yi just recently. He was arrested the year he was arrested and put in jail in December of 2018. He was arrested earlier that year in May. In May of 2018, he was arrested on the anniversary of that earthquake. His church, since the earthquake, had held a yearly prayer meeting praying for the people that had been affected by the earthquake. And it was it was an anniversary prayer meeting every year. And he was arrested on that particular year, 2018, for attempting to have this prayer meeting in remembrance of the earthquake victims in their own province where they were. And that's what eventually led to his arrest later that year, where he's been put in prison. But it was all connected with that because his church, I'm not sure, I don't know this for sure, but I'm pretty sure people he was connected with were some of the ones that were helping in that whole aftermath.
I love how that kind of like their mercy ministry done in the right way really is political.
It's a threat.
Oh yeah, because
it's the church stepping in and saying we're going to take care of our people. We're going to take care of our neighbors, and it's a testimony of who the true Messiah is. Messiah, the state, the state, your savior, or is it Jesus?
That's right.
So then should governments, I guess federal government, should be looking at themselves and saying, have we created an environment for human flourishing to grow such a way that private entities can function to be good Samaritans to their neighbors?
Yeah.
right? Like that's primarily what you want them to do.
You want to so protect their persons and property.
That's right. That's right.
So that they are freed and equipped to do the maximum good.
That's right.
For their people and their neighbors.
Mm-hmm.
That means, so not, punish evildoers, punish criminals, punish looters and
all that stuff, which is already starting to happen.
Yeah, right. That's got to be
Start
punished.
with Congress.
But then, right. Yes. But otherwise, you're just protecting their freedom to flourish.
Yeah.
Right.
Because when individuals, families, churches, and communities are maximally flourishing, have the maximum resources at their disposal, they're most ready to serve and help in a time of need.
And think about like the two kinds of citizens you could create. You can create the kind of citizen when bad things happen, you ask for the federal government to step in.
Yeah, you can't do anything.
You can't do anything. I need the federal government. This flood happened in our land, whatever. Or the kind of citizen when natural disaster happens, they know how to step in and help their neighbor.
Right.
Like that really is like a different vision for what it means to be America.
And I think there is a deep instinct still in America to be that.
I think so.
That the one who says, I want to help my neighbor.
Well, especially down in redneck South.
Yeah.
You remember Hurricane Katrina?
Yeah.
Who was the first ones to show up? It was a bunch of rednecks and boats and big
Master P in his helicopter showing up.
Yep.
I think there's a lot there, and that's back to Ben's point earlier. I mean, as bad as things are, I think there is still a lot here. And when you're in Ben's shoes and you're over in China and Hong Kong and you're looking at it and hear us talking about, our concerns that, John Kerry might, impinge on the First Amendment, which is, something serious to be concerned about.
Yeah.
I think Ben's also right to say, but, guys, we have a lot of fight to still put up.
Yeah.
And I think instincts, those instincts are demonstrated in hurricanes and floods like this, when a bunch of guys get out there in their boats and their four-wheelers and their chainsaws and their trucks, and they say, we got this. We'll take care of this. And we do not yet have a government, taping it off and saying, all you rednecks get out of here. The rednecks would never listen to them.
Yeah. Like the church should not.
Yeah, I know.
The church should be more redneck.
we need a redneck gospel.
That's right.
Speaking of which, America has strayed far from God the Father. She has fallen into a pit of sexual perversion, abortion, and a corrupt welfare state swelling with bureaucratic and socialistic blood, greed, and tyranny. So join us in the fight to bring prodigal America to repentance at Fight, Laugh, Feast this year. The Fight, Laugh, Feast conference is on October 31st to November 2nd. That's Reformation weekend, where we're gathering together Christians from all over the country, preaching a full octane, high octane gospel, calling America to repentance. We're going to be in Fort Worth, Texas. The theme is Prodigal America. As always, we'll have good food, good beer, even better fellowship. Get your tickets today, if you don't already, at prodigalamerica.com. That's prodigalamerica.com. Come see us. Reformation weekend in Fort Worth, Texas. Love to meet you then.
That's right.
So Ben, one of the things that when we read your bio, you said you help Christians in America figure out how to pray for their Chinese brothers out there. What's the way we can be praying for you and the people who are in Hong Kong?
Hebrews 13:3 has a clue there of how we should pray for people that are persecuted. And in the middle of that verse, there's one phrase there that's real important where it says, you pray for them as bound with them, as if you were literally bound with them, in their shoes, in their chains, in the stocks, whatever you want to say, but bound together with them. So you put yourself in their shoes, and from that place of like understanding, maybe thinking of what they're going through, imagining what it would be like, then you begin to pray for them prayers that you would want people to pray for you if that was you in that place. And so that's one way, for instance, we can pray for Wang Yi, is especially those of us who are ministers in any sense. We can put ourselves and say, what would it be like to be in prison for 9 years without family, without church, without fellowship? What struggles would I have in that place? And then begin to pray for him based on what we know of ourselves and the human condition and how we would struggle and what our temptations might be, and despair, or whatever it would be. And so that's one thing with Hebrews 13:3. And you can apply that to different things as well for the church and for wherever it is, praying for those who are suffering for the gospel's sake. For us, we just need wisdom to know how to go about defeating and fighting China. We know China's not going to, the communist regime. 75 years is not very long, and they might have another 75 years. Who knows? Maybe not. Maybe they only have a few more. We don't know what God's going to do with this country. So we're going to keep fighting and finding ways to preach the gospel. One of the reasons I'm in this particular place I'm at now is Robert Morrison was the first missionary to China. And that was only 200, and he arrived here in 1807. So we're just talking 217 years ago. Yeah. There was no Chinese Bible yet. He snuck in and was pretending to be a translator. Well, he was a translator, and he began to translate the Bible under threat of the death penalty back at that time. Wow. And in southern China. And he did that. He's buried in the city I'm in right here, right now. His grave is just about a mile away from where I'm at. 1834, he died, gave his life here on the field. And so, history, we got a long ways to go. And so we're going to see China is going to be a very different place, I think, in a couple generations. And so we're just kind of plant those seeds now and work. So pray for wisdom and pray for open doors and pray for those who are suffering in this current stage. There's a suffering aspect that we need to pray for those who suffer. Right. And as we continue to make strategic plans for the future. Ben, I
know we're kind of bringing this in for a landing, but one of the questions I was going to ask earlier, and it ties into what you were talking about here, just like, the gospel is there. The Christians are there. You said, China's going to look very different in a couple generations. I was thinking earlier, particularly, wondering about the problem of not having enough people. It's been pointed out by demographic studies and so on that this sort of one child policy has been pretty detrimental to China, and I know that's been I think modified or reversed in some way, shape, or form because they began seeing the danger of that. Are you beginning to see the cracks in the communist regime just simply by not having enough people?
A little bit. I think the current financial issue, they're having some financial troubles, and it's related to that question. There's the government, the population's top heavy, and there's not enough people making the right kind of money at the right places. So there's just a lot of weirdness in their financial as a nation. The people are really good saving in China, and they save so well that they don't spend enough to kind of keep the economy going. And so there's a lot of issues they're trying to figure out how to deal with where they can keep growing because they're not growing at the same pace they were, for 30, 40 years. And part of that has to do with the fact that what was the statistic? I shared this on the podcast, on the China Compass podcast the other day. They aborted in the last 30, 40 years, 330 million babies.
Oh, I'm sorry.
330 million.
How many years?
Babies.
How many years?
And I mean, since the one child policy was put in place and since the 70s, 330 million.
Wow.
I can't even calculate that number.
Right.
And I mean, and people talk about China being overpopulated, and that's just kind of neither here nor there. But just imagine what China would be. It'd be a very different place with that many more young people working, ideally, working, adding to and adding
kids.
That sweat equity and into the economy.
Yeah, 330 million people having kids would be different.
That's America. There's 330 million people here in the United States. 300 million, 330.
Wow.
They wiped out a whole country due to abortion.
And that's still ongoing. I mean, they're allowing more kids now, up to 2 or 3 or whatever it is, but abortion is still extremely common.
Wow.
But it's choice. People don't want to have more kids because they've learned from their parents and the generations before that it's easier to have the one, and you can put the one through school, and you just kind of have the nice, cute little family and have a dog, along with it. And it sounds a lot like the West, doesn't it? A little bit too, especially the urban areas. But yeah, so it's still definitely ongoing as well.
Wow, that's so. You've got a couple of books, Ben. Tell us about your books.
We got Tears for Tana.
The one there's one that you helped me with, Toby. You wrote the foreword to the book about John Payton. I didn't write the book, but I edited the new edition of that old biography, Tears for Tana. It's part 1 of John Payton's biography. Borden of Yale, Gabe's got it in his hand there. Borden of Yale, that's the missionary biography of William Borden, who was a millionaire missionary who died on his way to the mission field. Turns out he's actually my cousin. Did I tell you guys that?
Yeah.
He's my
You
cousin.
traced that for us. Yeah.
That's cool.
And so I edited the book and then found that out even later that we're related.
Wow.
But then throw it up on the screen. Throw the one that I just finished this week on this trip. Not that one.
Yeah.
That's my story. That's the least important one there.
I'm gonna brag on you a little bit for a second. I had my kids each during the summer. I have them read a book a month during the summer, and this is one of the books I had them rotate through. So one kid read it in July, another one in June, another.
Yeah.
Anyway, so my kids read it and really enjoyed this Unbeaten. This is Ben's story of getting kicked out of China, basically.
Yeah. Okay.
And my kids really enjoyed it. So thank you, Ben.
Yeah.
And I got to say, every time you mention that title, I don't like the title. It sounds like I'm saying I'm bragging about being unbeaten, but it's referring to a specific conversation I had with the police where they actually mocked and laughed and said, what are you so afraid of? Why won't you cooperate with this? It's not like we're going to beat you or anything. And they laughed. They thought it was funny.
Right.
And so they and I called them out on it. I said, what do you mean you're not going to beat me? Of course you're not going to beat me. I'm an American, but I know what you do to your own people. You beat the Christians. You even kill them. Wow. And so I called them out on that at that moment. But that's what that title refers to is I'm unbeaten, but the Chinese church is not unbeaten. They've been tortured and beaten and killed for their faith.
Wow.
And still are.
What's your latest book?
But no, the one that was on the screen.
Yeah, up on the screen.
Yeah, put that up there. So I stumbled across this earlier this year. What I like about this particular book, it's an old story. William Milne was Robert Morrison's partner. He was his partner in translating the Bible. Everyone knows Morrison. Most people know Morrison. Nobody knows about William Milne, his partner, partly because he died before the Bible was finished. He died at the age of 37 in modern day Malaysia, working with the Chinese colony there. And so this book is a republishing of Milne's memoirs, and it was originally compiled by Robert Morrison. So you've got a really cool look into the hearts of both men, both Robert Morrison as the editor and adding his own footnotes and notes, and then Milne as his partner in his journals, his letters. His testimony is amazing about how he came to be a missionary and be called to the Lord. So I just finished editing that and put it up. It's live on Kindle. The print version will be live in a couple of days. I'll have some copies at the Fight Laugh Feast conference at my table that I can I'll be selling there as well. But Robert Morrison is buried just down the way from where I'm at right now. Oh. And I thought it was really cool that he was the one that actually published this book 200 years ago. Yeah, 200 years ago this year, Morrison published the book. And so I just republished the old book and did a little bit of editing and organizing the book so it's easier to follow and read. But it was really impactful. I really enjoyed it myself. And I've been sharing that the last week or so around here. Even last night, actually, I had a meeting with two churches here in the town I'm in here. On a Monday night, we had a meeting and I shared the testimony of Morrison and Milne and then sent people free copies of the book, PDF versions of the book. And so they were really blessed by it, the locals here at the church here. Wow. So, yeah, I encourage people to check that out.
Always appreciate hearing from you, Ben. And, I think the story of John G. Paton it reminds me of what you're doing in Hong Kong and in China.
In Peru.
John G. Paton, he buried his first wife and son in Tana, this island of cannibals in the Far East. And now today, the island is filled.
It's got Presbyterians on that island.
With Bible-believing Christians, Bible-believing Presbyterian Christians. I'm going to... Go ahead.
Sorry, I'm going to say it because last time we talked about Paton back in February, the book wasn't done yet. So people can go get that book at johngpaton.com. It's on Amazon right now. So you can get that, the Kindle or the print version of that book. And with Toby's forward in there.
It's a powerful story of his faith and faithfulness. And I think it's an encouragement for wherever you are bleeding and crying and sweating for the kingdom of God. Whether you are busy at home with 4 or 5 immortal souls that you are teaching the gospel to and raising as Christians to be men and women of Christ, whether you are wrestling with business or spreadsheets or computer programming, or if you are on the mission field like Ben, laboring for the gospel, laboring for the kingdom, not one tear, not one drop of sweat or blood is wasted. Christ receives it all, and he will justify it all. Yeah. It will all be vindicated, and including all these little ones that have been brutally murdered in America and in China. Christ will get the glory, and that blood will not go unrequited.
Ben, thank you for what you're doing, man. We'll be praying for you. Thank you very much.
Zoom out. Show my wide screen. You can see China behind me out the window here.
We're not showing where you are. We are not showing where you are. Nope, we're not doing it. If you're single, get married. If you're married, have you some kids. You have kids, go baptize them. Until tomorrow, love God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. Love your neighbor as yourself. Cover it up. Don't fight, laugh, and feast. We don't know. You know people can find you like that, Ben. What are you doing?
I think he was trying
to get found.
I think he was trying to cover up the baptize your babies part. I think he's trying to distract the people from that.